But what if those organisations whose role it is to help these vulnerable families in Leicester are themselves fighting to survive? Well, BBC Radio Leicester's been given an exclusive look at new research which highlights exactly what's happening. Swinging public spending cuts are now impacting heavily on the voluntary sector, and that could have a damaging effect on those in need. Well, to tell us a bit more is Kevan Liles, who's the Chief Executive of Voluntary Action Leicestershire. Kevan, good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
Tell us a bit more about your report. What's the key finding?
The key finding here is that voluntary groups and community groups across the city and county who are at the front line of people who are really struggling in the current austerity climate are the ones who are actually also facing cuts themselves. And we've talked to 190 groups, and over half of them have already faced cuts in the last 12 months.
Give me some example of specific bodies that have actually begun to struggle since having their spending cut.
Well, in the city, one of the biggest organisations that's struggling is the Lighthouse Learning, which is based in Braunston, one of the poorest parts of the city, and they're saying now that they are facing closure because all of their money is disappearing, and they've been doing incredible work with very poor young people and families in the city, and they are going to lose all of their money. So that absolute frontline support for people who are most in need is going to disappear.
And is that money coming from general funds on a nationwide basis, or is this because of city council cutbacks?
This is a whole mixture. The initial, what this research is showing is how there's a long lead time to these cuts. That cuts have happened 12 to 18 months ago. They happened again 6 months ago, and they're going to happen again with the budget setting that's coming up, both city, county, and district level. In the next few months as well. So it's cut after cut after cut is happening to these organisations.
Now, it's an unpalatable truth, but whichever way you look at it, the financial downturn is affecting the public sector, it's affecting the private sector, it's going to affect the voluntary sector.
Absolutely, and voluntary groups, like the general public, know the situation the country is in. They know that cuts are going to have to be made. What we're saying, what we found from this research, is the cuts that are happening are affecting those people who are most in need in this country. And what we're asking as part of this research is for our policymakers, and in particular now the city and county councillors who are going to be taking these cuts, these budget decisions in the next few months, is to think hard about those budget decisions and make sure that they protect frontline services. And lots of these voluntary groups are the people who are working with those most in need, the people who don't go to the normal statutory services, the people who avoid the officialdom because they're scared of it, and the voluntary groups, the people who are reaching those who are most in need.
Now, as you know, we've obviously been investigating the extent of child poverty in Leicester specifically with our series Born Poor, which has been running all this week. What kind of impact specifically will further public spending cuts have on anyone's ability to help those that we've been talking about?
Well, we are. You've got Toys on the Table running at the moment, and the public are incredibly supportive. We've had huge increases in volunteers, and people working in voluntary groups, as Ros mentioned in your piece about the CAB, work all hours to try and make sure that these services are sustained and maintained for people most in need. But what we're going to have is we have the Child Poverty Commission in the city, because so many children in the city are growing up in poverty already before we have these cuts. We have so many young people with nothing to do. We have over 1 million young people now in the country unemployed. If we don't do something now, we are going to have a legacy of decades of poverty, of decades of people completely outside of the system. And this is the clarion call to say, wake up country, wake up politicians, you have to do something now to protect these vulnerable families and vulnerable young people.